This is the France 24 debate. We're looking at the issue of the French attitudes to business and small business. And on the day when the in Parliament was introduced the budget for next year, which is an austerity budget. And we're pleased to be joined again for part two of our discussion by Marie Ekelund of a group that calls itself the Pigeon, which was founded on Facebook. What, about a couple weeks ago?
Well, the day it went out, so that's Friday 2 weeks ago.
Oh wow! So 10 days old, and it's created a huge buzz in France. A lot of young entrepreneurs who are complaining about new capital gains tax. Also with us is Stéphane Dehoche, President and CEO of Neolane, the MP for the French abroad in North America, calling Narasigan, excuse me, and Mark Dean of the Bloomberg News Agency, and joining us from Washington, Romain Rancière of the Paris School of Economics. If you look at the Journal du Dimanche, which is a popular Sunday paper, regularly they publish a list of the 50 most popular Frenchmen and women. Tops of the list is a former tennis star turned pop singer, Yannick Noah. There's singers, athletes, politicians on the list. But Romain Rancière, it's interesting that there's no French equivalent of Steve Jobs or Richard Branson's. In fact, there's nobody from the business world in that top 50. Why is that?
That in French, the value of entrepreneurship and more generally the value of innovation is not getting enough recognition in the popular world. So I think there is clearly an effort to try to promote innovation, to try to promote entrepreneurship. That's certainly necessary, and so policy toward that could be valuable.
Stéphane Dehoche, you started your third business in 2001, and you were telling us in part one about the constraints when it comes to overhead. This is sort of the flip side of France, which has a great social care services, great nanny state. The flip side being that you've got a rigid labor market. And I know that when you go above a certain number of employees, did you at one point, I know that it's after 50 employees, there are all these rules that set
you have a works council called comité d'entreprise that give you some constraints. It's not one constraint per se that the issue is to have so many, That means that the labor cost in total is not just the social tax you have on top of it, but you have to add the cost of the works council, comité d'entreprise, typically 1% of your salary, and or the training tax, and there you have many taxes like that, and at the end it's a lot to pay basically. But then France give some help as well, because there is a lot of that money that can claim back, and it works well well also. It's not easy when you are a small company below 20 people. You have a hard time to get some of that money back. But when you are a more structured company, it's even more true for big company in France. There is a kind of sport that you have to claim your training tax back, your this or that tax back. There is one of these popular in France, which is a tax discount you can get for R&D. So each time you make development, basically, research and development.
So France is a good place to do business.
Yeah, I think it can be, but you have to play with the existing system. So you will pay a lot of tax, but you should not forget that you should claim a part back. It makes it just more difficult. That's a break in total. Well, overall, it works, I think we have a kind of nice environment to grow so far, but we lose sometimes.
If I could just sort of give the sort of Anglo-American point of view, I mean, I think that's absolutely right. The trouble for small companies is that it's very complex. And of course, the larger you are, the easier it is to manage the Code du Travail and all these tax codes. And therefore, if you're Total or Carrefour or, whoever, you hire a couple of lawyers and accountants, and they spend their days, as Stéphane said, playing this game, and getting the most out of the tax system. But if you've got 10 employees or 15 or 25 or 30, it's a lot harder. And especially if you're, young and inexperienced and, you've got an idea, you've got a software idea, you've got an engineering idea, that's what you do. That's what you're interested in. You're not there to maximize your tax benefits. And that's where France loses. And especially, unfortunately, the intentions are good. But, in all this meddling around, it just does add a lot of complexity. And we've been talking about what's coming up in terms of the competitiveness agenda in France, and that's there. But there's a lot riding on this. Since François Hollande has come into office, he's been talking about this. And, a lot remains to be seen, really, what we're going to get in the next few months.
Corinne Narancigan?
I think there's an understanding also that we need to have a stable environment. I think there is a complexity, it's true, although sometimes I think it's a little bit hyped. I think we are our own worst enemies sometimes at perpetuating this image of France being much more complicated in other countries, but it's not necessarily always the case in every area. I think France is still the European country that attracts the most foreign investment still today, so I think it shows that we're still very attractive. But I think the main issue is to have a stable environment so that companies, even if it can be complex, that they know exactly what they're dealing with and they can plan for it over a long period of time and not be worried that it's going to change. The tax code is going to change dramatically every year. So I think there is an understanding that we need to be in a stable environment. That's also why it was so important to vote the European Treaty last week to show that we're committed to reducing the debt, to the 3% objective for the deficit, to show that we're committed to financial stability. And I think that's also a strong signal.
A strong signal, but at the same time, it's the issue of whether we're talking about large or small corporations. Would you agree, Mary Ekelund, that part of the reason the media was a little bit caught off guard by this whole Pigeon story is, I guess journalists are often used to, when there's a business story, they go and they interview the head of the French Business Leaders Association and they interview the head of the unions, and that's it. They're
Exactly.
not used to outside players.
No, because if you look at France and at the big companies in France, they're very old, which is something different from the United States. Like for the past 40 years, there have been only four companies in France that were built and that are spending more than 100 million euro in R&D, that are innovative and large companies. Only 4 since 1980. No, it's 40 years also, 1972. So in the US, that number is 82. So the thing is that we're always seeing the same people because basically the key economical players are just the same for the past 40 years or something. So we have a very nice ecosystem to build medium companies. But then we need to go one step further if we really want to win back some economical strength, is to be able to build new large companies. And for me, one of the bets that we need to tackle with this new industrial strategy that we want to put for France and with all the reflection that we will have in the future is how do we go from small companies to medium-sized companies to large companies that are maintaining that how can we build that elevator? And we have identified a lot of breaks that are preventing from doing that, and that we have to work on. Financing is part of it. After venture capital, for example, you don't find any funding in France or even in Europe to really go through the high level, to the next level. The stock exchange is another one, especially on technology. There's no analyst in France that understand technology, so you need to ask in the US to say, like, can I buy this? Is this a good company? I don't understand what they're doing.
It's interesting. So, and the French reinsurer, the COFAS, recently reported that last year, 34% of French businesses went under. We can look at the chart for the trend over the long term. What's interesting, though, and what you don't, I guess it doesn't really say in the chart, is that small businesses are actually holding their own. The number of small businesses dying is remaining sort of steady. It's the medium-sized ones that are getting clobbered at this point in time, Mark Dean. What is the trend in the long run, though?
Well, I mean, I couldn't tell you between the medium and the small and the bigger who's going bankrupt. But I think it doesn't really matter. You know, we want innovation. We want companies growing and investing. Full stop. And let's not ask if the cat is black or white. Let's just ask that, you know, he's there and he's growing.
And at this point, the issue of how much money you invest, well, the old argument, the old way of doing things, I guess, Corinne Narassiguin, was the French state played a heavy hand in things. You had all these these companies that were basically funded by the state, or where the state was the main shareholder. Now, with the budget numbers coming out today, that's not going to be the case anymore.
No, I think it's we've moved away from this for a long time now. Even during the previous socialist administration, which was a while ago now, 1997 to 2002, we privatized a lot of public companies. So I think we moved away from that policy a long time ago already. We understand that the state must be an enabler. There are certain areas where, unfortunately, we still have to do a lot. I think if there is a need today for a public investment bank, it's also because the private banks in France don't really do their job in terms of risk taking, and that's a big issue compared to other countries, especially countries like North America or the Anglo-Saxon world in general.
Romain Rancière, I don't understand. France, where the financial make up such a huge chunk of the top 40 companies. Why is it that they're inefficient in funding small business and small entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so I think one of the reasons which might be about the structure of the financial sector, and the financial sector is heavily concentrated, and then the incentive to take on risk in these circumstances are not that high. So when you have a lack of competition in the financial sectors, when you have kind of a big conglomerates of banks controlling most of the market share, then the incentive is to preserve these rents, not to look for new financing opportunities and to take risk. So I think we need to find ways of fostering more competition in the banking sector. So the banks are very good at defending themselves. I think because we are not that competitive, we also are safer. But that's a kind of a rubbish argument. We need to find ways to provide both more regulation, and probably at the European levels, and also to have more active pro-competition policies in the financial sector. I think that's one of the key elements, alongside with labor market flexibility, to try to remove this kind of bottlenecks and distortion that the other type of talkers alluded to before.
Stéphane Dehoche, you mentioned earlier, in fact, that despite all the hurdles, despite a rigid labor market, despite all of that, France is an okay place to do business.
I think it's okay to start, especially, back to the discussion around mid-sized enterprise. I think to start, even financing a small company to start, it's doable. There is business angel, there is VCs, and you can do it on your own as well. And I think it's not that difficult to start. It's growing that is difficult. I think that's why mid-sized enterprise are so rare, especially compared to Germany, for instance, where it's a big difference with France for close countries. There is a lot of mid-sized enterprise.
Now,
I have no good explanation, but I see at least one thing because I try to grow to that size, being 300 people now within Neolen, that there is, from a law standpoint, from social law standpoint, many constraints. It's easier to hire in UK. I'm not talking about getting rid of people. Just hiring people is easier in UK and in the US. And I can easily compare because we have subsidiaries in all of those countries. It's just easier.
Why? Because people are unfireable in France? That's sort of the reputation.
There is a lot of good intention in France in the way we organize things. So we want to protect people, which is a nice intention, but the overall outcome of all of this, protection we put is that we freeze the market.
I think it's important to add, it's not just about firing. I mean, firing, the ability to reduce your workforce when the economy turns down is very important for small or medium-sized companies. But it is, again, just the sheer complexity. You want to hire someone, and you it's not like you just go out and say, oh, well, you're a good candidate, I'll take you in. You have to sort of classify that person, and is it a short-term or long-term contract, and the Code du Travail is 600 years thick, and there's a reason for that. And again, that's where the complexity is the problem.
By the way, just days after François Hollande was inaugurated as president, the British Prime Minister offered to, quote, roll out the red carpet for French entrepreneurs who might want to cross the channel. Well, last week, the mayor of London echoed that call and even used the Marseillaise, the French national anthem, to seduce his target audience.
Allons enfants de la patrie. We say to the people, not since 1789 has there been such a tyranny or terror. French people living and working in London already, I think it's estimated about 240,000. And I say to you all, in case you're watching tonight, vous êtes tous les bienvenus à Londres. Voilà.
You are all welcome, says Boris Johnson in French there. Corinne Narassigan, your reaction to that?
I think the British are very good at marketing. I think we can see the competition here between European countries today to attract foreign investments. I think it shows there. I'm talking about marketing because in truth, I'm not sure that the tax system is as great as Mr. Cameron is pretending it is in the UK. There are certain things that may be better than in France for certain types of investments. In general, for the workers, for the workforce, the tax system is not really better. Sometimes it's even worse, especially for families. It's I think it's more it's more grandstanding than anything else.
Mary Eklund, were you seduced by Boris's call there, by Boris Johnson's call?
Not yet. No, there's something for entrepreneurs. UK just focused with the entrepreneurs incentive scheme on that particular type of attracting entrepreneurs in the UK. This is where they put their real fiscal incentive on today.
All right, and it's a question that will continue, of course, to follow as those recommendations in that law gets rolled out to introduce how to help kickstart small business in France. Corinne Narassigan, I want to thank you for joining us. I want to thank Marc Dean, Stéphane Dehoche, Mary Eklund. I want to thank Romain Rancière for being with us from Washington for this discussion. And thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.
Thank you.